In 1496, Lorenzo di Francesco de' Medici got Michelangelo involved in a scheme to sculpt the statue and pass it off as one from antiquity.
What's going on, guys? Welcome to today's video.
In today's video, we'll be talking about the Renaissance artist Michelangelo. He was born Michelangelo di Lodovico Buonarroti Simoni on March 6, 1475 in Caprese, Italy. He was a sculptor, painter, architect, and poet. He was considered the greatest living artist during his lifetime, and he was so famous that his biography was written while he was still alive. He was born into a minor noble family that had lost most of its status by the time he was born. It would have been a drop in social status to become an artist, which explains why he started his apprenticeship late at around 13. He studied under Domenico Ghirlandaio, which should have lasted 3 years, but he left after a year, feeling like he had nothing left to learn. Lorenzo the Magnificent, the ruler of Florence at the time, later took him under his wing. While with the Medicis, Michelangelo had access to their art collection. While in Florence, he created the Battle of the Centaurs in 1491 and the Madonna of the Stairs. When Lorenzo the Magnificent died, Michelangelo left the Medici court, and after Savonarola arrived, the Medicis were expelled from Florence, and Michelangelo followed them to Venice and Bologna. In Bologna, he carved 3 statues for the shrine of Saint Dominic, an angel with a candlestick, and Saints Petronius and Proculus. In 1496, Lorenzo di Francesco de' Medici got Michelangelo involved in a scheme to sculpt the statue and pass it off as one from antiquity. Cardinal Raffaele Riario fell for the deception and bought the statue. He was so impressed when he discovered that it was a fake that he invited Michelangelo to Rome. It's this time while in Rome that he sculpted his Pietà. Here are some fun facts about the Pietà.
This is the only artwork he ever signed. He did so after overhearing someone misappropriate it to another artist. He later regretted his impulsivity and never signed another artwork again. In 1736, while being moved, some of the fingers on her left hand were broken.
They were later restored. In 1972, this crazy dude took a hammer to the Pietà and vandalized it. His name is Laszlo Toth. In 1973, at the age of 33, he walked into St. Peter's Basilica shouting, "I am the risen Christ," and then proceeded to vandalize the statue. He broke her arm at the elbow, one of her eyelids, and her nose. When questioned by the authorities why he would damage the statue, he said that he was compelled by God to do so because Christ is eternal and therefore wouldn't have a mother. He then was placed in an Italian psychiatric hospital for a little over 2 years, after which he was promptly deported back to Australia. A little after the Pietà, Michelangelo worked on the Madonna of Bruges, the Doni Tondo, and the Tade Tondo. After a few years in Rome, he moved back to Florence, and in 1504 he completed his statue of David. Here are some fun facts about the David. The stone used to sculpt the David was previously abandoned by 2 separate artists. The statue is 16 feet 11 inches tall. It was vandalized twice, once in 1527 during a Medici revolt where the arm was broken into 3 pieces, and in 1992 when a man snuck a hammer into the basilica and damaged the left foot. Before we proceed, we need to address the elephant in the room. Pause. You may have noticed that a lot of these ancient paintings and statues have small phalluses, because the ancient Greeks and Romans believed that if you had a large phallus, you were foolish, lustful, and ugly. According to the Greek playwright Aristophanes, the ideal male proportions were a gleaming chest, bright skin, broad shoulders, a tiny tongue, a strong butt, and a little prick. Pause. After working on the David, he was later commissioned to work on a series of statues and paintings that went unfinished. And in 1508, he was commissioned to work on the Sistine Chapel. The main focal points depicted 9 scenes from Genesis, which were the separation of light and darkness, the creation of the sun, moon, and the earth, the separation of land from water, the creation of Adam, the creation of Eve, the temptation and expulsion, the sacrifice of Noah, the great flood, and the drunkenness of Noah. The colored paintings shown here are 7 prophets and sibyls. And the naked men like the ones that appeared on the screen are known as the Ignudi. No one really knows why they're there. Michelangelo tried to get out of painting the Sistine Chapel. He tried to get out of it because he felt like painting was an inferior art form and he viewed himself more as a sculptor. The fresco is 133 feet by 46 feet and took him 4 years to complete.
From 1513 to 1515, he worked on his Moses sculpture.
You may have noticed that Homie has two horns. The horns are there because of a mistranslation in the Bible. The mistranslation comes from Exodus 34 verse 29. I'm using the New Living Testament, New Living Translation.
When Moses came down Mount Sinai carrying the 2 stone tablets inscribed with the terms of the covenant, he wasn't aware that his face had become radiant because he had spoken to the Lord. The Hebrew word translated here as radiant can also mean horned. Between 1520 and 1534, Michelangelo worked on the Medici Chapel. In 1527, during the Medici Revolt, Michelangelo acted as the designer of fortifications. In 1534, Michelangelo left Florence and went to Rome, where he'd stay for the rest of his life. That same year, he began work on the Last Judgment. In his later years, he didn't sculpt as much, mostly focusing on painting and architectural work. He was the chief architect of St. Peter's Basilica until he died. His last sculpture was the Rodanini Pietà that he'd been working on 6 days prior to his death, which remained unfinished due to a lack of stone. He got feverish days before his death and started burning sketches and drawings because he was aware of his reputation and didn't want to leave anything behind that he didn't think was worthy. He sent for his favorite nephew and his friends. He had the story of Christ's crucifixion read to him multiple times. Michelangelo was said to have told his friend, Daniele da Volterra, "O Daniele, I am done for. I am in your keeping. Do not abandon me." And Daniele stayed by his side till the end. Even though Michelangelo spent so many years in Rome, his heart was still in Florence and asked his friends to take his body there. On February 18, 1564, Michelangelo passed at the ripe age of 88 years old. A grand funeral was held for him and he was entombed in the Church of Santi Apostoli. Before we get to the final result, Michelangelo's loved ones knew that he wanted to be buried in Florence, but they also knew that Rome wouldn't let him go so easily. So they waited 2 weeks after his death to steal his body essentially from his tomb and transport him over the course of a month to Florence. He was welcomed with an elaborate ceremony, and now he's entombed in the Church of Santa Croce. Thanks for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing. This was a really fun video to make and stressful at the same time. Till the next one.